No, that's right.
Nice to see you.
John Martin, who's heading the Higher Institute, and Linda Henshaw Thompson, one of the board keepers this week.
Problems which are far greater than most people imagine, and that cost this nation dearly to solve.
Say from the start, for those of you who are not too familiar with Turning Point, that this is not a Puritan crusade. Turning Point is not a bit every now and then. After all, we are meeting in a brewery. Apart from which, they've invited me to chair the session, and I'm a drinker, and so here that my own involvement stems from television. Some years ago, I produced a documentary on what sounds, on the face of it, a quite different subject about throughout society. Not just on the roads, but on other accident statistics too, of course, oncome indistinguishable. Then I did 2 programs on drug abuse. In one, we followed a junkie by the name of Gina, and what intrigued me as we were doing it was that the paralyzers. Now, I like to think, perhaps erroneously, that that program helped to encourage the abandonment of barbiturate prescribing, or at least most of it, but tranquilizers are still to a penny, as we'll hear later, and largely submerged problem, and to learn that drink and drugs are much bigger.
Ladies and gentlemen, 1989 marks the Silver Jubilee of Turning Point, a charity which, during its 25 years, has gained enormous experience in dealing with problems related to drug and alcohol misuse. Today, Turning Point is the largest national voluntary organisation catering for those with drink, drug and mental health problems. Before going any further, I should make it clear that what I have to say is not the result of any special expertise. But in my time as patron, I have seen at first hand some of the work undertaken by Turning Point around the country, and the conclusions I have drawn are perhaps those any layman might reach given a similar opportunity. I was quickly made aware of the fact that drug and alcohol problems are on the increase, especially among the young. I will not trouble you now with statistics. No doubt better qualified speakers will do so later. But anybody who reads newspapers, listens to the radio, or watches television will recognise the underlying contributions made by drugs and alcohol to many of the problems which afflict society. The next discovery came as more of a surprise. Those who imagine that drug and alcohol problems mainly affect the less fortunate members of our community would be quite wrong. On the contrary, addiction can strike any who suffer stress in their personal or professional lives, for alcohol and drugs do not respect age, sex, class or occupation, and the line between recreational use and creeping addiction is perilously thin. We must remember then that the majority of Turning Point's clients come from ordinary communities. Very few of them resemble a stereotype junkie or drunk. Most have, or certainly had, a normal family and working life. For many, the tragic consequence of their addiction is that they have lost their jobs and hurt and confused their families. As I have learned about the problems which Turning Point seeks to help, I have been increasingly concerned by the effects on families of drug and alcohol abuse. Very often, it is in the home that the climate for addiction is created, and equally often, it is in the home that its worst consequences are felt. A stable domestic background where to simple duties of family life are shared and understood, can do much to strengthen those tempted to find refuge in drink or drugs. It is sometimes argued that addicts bring their problems on themselves. But I've noticed that those, such as Turning Point, who have first-hand knowledge of what these problems really are, seem less inclined to pass judgment. Instead, I suggest that we consider what part we can play in the fight against addiction, whether as a parent, a friend, a colleague, or an employer. I know that today's conference will concentrate on drug and alcohol problems, but I should also mention Turning Point's work in the field of mental health. As more mental patients leave hospital to join the community, there will be increasing demand on Turning Point services. The charity's 3 mental health projects help ex-patients make the transition from the institutionalised life of a mental hospital to a more normal existence in the outside world. For people who have been in hospital for as long as they can remember, learning to fend for themselves can be a frightening experience. Even the simplest tasks, such as understanding money or using household appliances, may have to be learned from scratch. This is an area of growing demand, and Turning Point has received many requests from local authorities to extend its services for the long-term mentally ill. Mental health, like the problems of drug and alcohol misuse, does not easily attract public sympathy. There are many charities which campaign for more appealing causes. In overcoming this disadvantage, Turning Point has developed an initiative approach to its work, typified by this joint venture with a major brewery. I believe that Whitbread and Turning Point are to be congratulated for their initiative, which is just one example of the charity's strategy of building a strong partnership with industry and business to help fight drug and alcohol problems at work. Now in its 25th year, Turning Point faces greater challenges than ever before. Its partnerships with government and industry offer much hope for the future. Conferences such as today's will, I'm sure, make valuable progress towards the elimination of drug and alcohol problems at work. But just as Turning Point believes these problems must be tackled on a painstaking and individual level, so we, in turn, must recognise the part that individuals can play in caring for all the casualties of our society. Thank you.
believe that in a direct and tangible manner, the impact of the Princess's support will be to make drug and alcohol problems more easily and more sanely talked about, less doom-laden, and as she is, among other things, make it that much easier for someone to take that difficult first step and phone one of Turning Point's lines or call in at one of its centres and say,
for more than 2 years. Today's conference aimed to highlight the economic and human costs that drink and drugs problems have at work. Around 14 million working days are lost each year because of alcohol problems. In recent years, the Princess has been at the forefront of several anti-drug and drink campaigns. In this, one of her most important speeches to date, she said such problems often affect those we least suspect. VO2. She also talked of the effect